Well, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I am very excited to be sharing with you a review for the Colors of Nature vegan watercolor paints. First, here in the voiceover, I'm going to be telling you a bit about the company and these watercolors, and then we're going to switch over to a live look at the color comparisons with my swatch binder. Of course, as a disclaimer, I just want to mention that this video is not sponsored, although the paints were sent to me to review and take a look at for a guide that I'm compiling. However, all of the thoughts and opinions expressed in this video are, of course, my own as always. I've had these paints for several weeks now, and if you've been following me over on Instagram or even in a video that I uploaded here on YouTube a couple weeks ago, I have been taking my time really getting to know these colors before giving them a full review, since they are so different from a lot of the other watercolors that I have used in the past. Colors of Nature is a Canadian company whose entire focus centers around cruelty-free art supplies. I came across them while researching for a vegan watercolor guide that I am compiling, so be sure to subscribe and hit that bell if you'd like to be notified when that other video comes out, but today we are just going to be focusing on the Colors of Nature watercolor paints. Like all of their products, their watercolors are made with non-toxic, earth-friendly, petroleum-free, and cruelty-free ingredients, which are all sourced from plants and minerals. These paints are suitable for artists as well as children, as they are both high quality and also pose no health concerns due to the fact that they are non-toxic. Because they have such strict guides and components for the types of pigments that are going to be included within their company, they do carry a rather limited range of pigments to meet those standards that they have set for themselves. At the time that this video is releasing, they currently carry 18 colors, and they are burnt sienna, chromium green, dark burnt umber, dark raw sienna, dark raw umber, dark yellow ochre, goldenrod yellow, light burnt umber, light raw umber, light yellow ochre, medium raw sienna, natural black, natural red, rose red, titanium light, ultramarine blue, ultramarine violet, and vermilion red. I haven't been able to try out some of their more varied pigment like the rose red, vermilion, or ultramarine violet, but I was sent a very wide range of earth tones plus the ultramarine and chromium green to try out and see how I like them. These paints come in 10 milliliter reusable pots, which also keep in tone with the earth-friendly model, given that you can wash them out once they're empty and reuse them for another purpose. They are considered semi-moist on their website, but in some cases in person I found that they were very moist right out of the pot, as if someone had just molded them. Although there were a few really dry colors like the umbers, which were almost solid, but there were chunks that could still easily be cut off with a palette knife and then molded into a pan so that you could set them up for future use. If you prefer to work from wet paints, they can be used fresh with each use. You would just kind of dab a little bit out of the pot and put it on whatever palette that you're using, or as I prefer, they can also be dried out in individual pans. If doing that, a film will develop very quickly over the top so that there isn't any type of like toppling over concern, and then they were also really safe to travel with after only a couple of days of sitting there. By a few weeks later, they are completely dried out, but they still re-wet easily after you spritz them with a little spray bottle. I also want to add in here that there was very minimal shrinking in the pan. So what you see is what you are going to get, and that is a lot of paint. Adding to that, these paints are extremely affordable since each pot is only $6.95, or you can even buy a baker's dozen, which is 13 pots of paint, for $70, which is over 20% off the list price if you buy them individually. They offer other sets like 6 or 8, and each set, whether it's 6, 8, or 13, are all entirely customizable, meaning that you get to choose the colors that you receive in that color combination. Given that there is no shrinkage, that you get to pick your own colors, and that even at full price, these are only $7 per 10 milliliters, these are an incredible value and one that I think is absolutely worth it if these are types of colors that you would use often. The one and only issue that I really had with these paints, and it really depends on your personal preference for sensory tolerance, is that the paints have a really strong, slightly sweet, earthy type smell to them, and it's pretty persistent. My pans have been drying out for a couple of weeks at this point, largely uncovered, but they still have a moderately sweet smell to them. When I asked the company about this, they said that the scent comes from the cosmetic grade natural fragrance preservative adhesive that they use in the paints to keep them from spoiling. And I just wanted to throw that in here because although it doesn't smell bad necessarily, it is really noticeable to me, and I just wanted to let you guys know about that in case that is an issue for you as well. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we are going to be taking a look at these color by color in just a few moments, and at the end of the video I also have some paintings to show you that I already made with these paints, and there was also that other video that I can go ahead and link up in the right hand corner for you. But overall, I just want to say that I really love these paints. Now they're obviously not going to be for everyone. Those of you who like big bright colors like opera rose or leaf green might not find these as useful, but for those of us who love painting natural subjects, they are really quite beautiful. They are all made from earth pigments that are largely known to be quite light fast, and the textures, and not just the granulation, you're going to see that in a moment, but there's also texture to this paint that is just lovely. You know me, and you know how much I love my earth colors, and I found it really awesome and unique to have such a wide range of earth tones that I could really pinpoint what my favorite version of each color was. My personal favorites, if you're interested in knowing, are the light yellow ochre, the burnt sienna, both the light and the dark burnt umbers, the dark raw umber, and the ultramarine, all of which again you will see in just a few moments. If you are looking for other art supplies too, I cannot personally vouch for any of these since I haven't tried them, but they have many available on their website, like raw pigments to make your own paints. They've got the glass molars that you would need to do that. They've got vegan brushes, vegan papers, crayons, pastels, and I believe it's a fairly new product for them, but they also have earth-friendly oil paints, and you can find all of those at colorsofnature.com. And they offer worldwide shipping. Alrighty, so you're probably ready by now to take a look at the individual colors, so let's hop on over to that live look at them with the swatch binder. Alright everyone, we have reached the color comparison portion of the video. We've got all of our dried swatch cards here with our second layers on them, and I have a variety of both commercial and handmade paints to show you for some of these color comparisons. I don't have a whole lot to say for the white. It's pretty much the same as other titanium white, so we're just going to go ahead. I'll show that to you real quick. You can see the opacity does go up a bit when you do a second layer, but we're just going to set that aside and then we'll focus on our other colors here. So as we've covered a bit in the earlier parts of the video, there are a lot of colors that are very similar in this line since these are all natural based pigments and they have very high standards and specific standards for which paints they're going to be using within their company to maintain their mission statement. I feel like they've maybe stretched some of the standard colors to a little bit wider variety, which could be a really good thing if you're a really picky person and like really want a specific version of a specific color. So we're just going to kind of go through here. We've got our yellow ochre type colors, we've got our reds, we've got our burnt umbers, our raw umbers, and then a couple of other colors here. So let me just go ahead and set these off to the side really quickly. Alright, so we're going to start off with our yellow ochre colors. Then we've got kind of a range here. I have a couple of handmade paints that I can compare them to, and then we'll switch over to our commercially made paints. So I've got two from Prush, which is Eve Bolt, you know her, and then we've also got one from Pfeiffer Art. So all the colors vary a tiny bit here, where Colors of Nature's light yellow ochre is probably the warmest and brightest of the group. Then we've got the raw sienna medium, and that's PY43 as well. It's very similar in color, but perhaps a little bit less orange and a tiny bit more brown. Then we've got dark yellow ochre, which is very different from all of the other ones. It's a much deeper, richer tone. Eve's Spanish gold ochre uses PY42, and that's not the same as the other ones here, but I did want to include it. It's a really unique color, but I didn't have a lot of handmade paints to go off of, so just for comparison's sake, it's there. Her PY43, though, is really middle of the road ochre. It's very yellow and a little bit on the brown side. Definitely not as warm as these other ones, but it is the most transparent out of the ones, excluding this one. It's the most transparent out of the ones here. Pfeiffer Art is very similar in hue to the Colors of Nature, however it is much more opaque. So we're going to clear those out of the way. We're going to bring in our commercial paint samples to compare these two. As per usual, I'm going to have to do this like in little sections here, so let's just do color by color, starting with the light yellow ochre. Comparing it to some of our other ones, it's actually pretty close to Daniel Smith's yellow ochre. Daniel Smith's might be a tiny bit more reddish, but like I mentioned, this is a warm version of this color. We definitely get further away when we go into things like schminkas, and it's not quite as warm as Winsor Newton's yellow ochre, which is also deeper and darker in hue. Compared to these ones, again, we're getting further away. I think it most closely resembles our Daniel Smith. And that is that. So we're going to set that one off to the side. We've got the medium raw sienna next, and this one is almost a complete dead ringer for Daniel Smith's, except for the fact that it's a teeny tiny bit more opaque. We are all used to seeing the yellow ochres being a little bit on the opaque side, but it's nice that this offers us a transparent version. It doesn't glaze quite as cleanly as the other one that we already looked at does, or the Daniel Smith. Well, I guess it glazes about the same as the PY42, or it's a little bit closer. The PY43 for Daniel Smith, though, glazes a little bit more cleanly. Moving into some of our other colors, it's actually also very close to Winsor Newton's, and once again we get further away as we move down the page. To compare this to some raw siennas, I don't have a lot of raw sienna to compare them to, and the two that I do have are very, very different. So it's much more reddish than the My Mary Blue raw sienna, and it is much more yellow than Daniel Smith's raw sienna. Finally, we've got the dark yellow ochre, and I'm going to leave it on this side real quick to compare it to our deeper colors that we have here. It doesn't really match any of them. I guess it's closest to Daniel Smith's raw sienna, but this one again is more red, whereas this is more brownish yellow. If we flip back to the other side of our PY43s, it is much darker and browner than any of the other options. Moving on to our natural red, this is made from PR102, which I do have from Pfeiffer Art. Pfeiffer's is a little bit more purpley and has a really deep texture, like I mentioned, that the Colors of Nature ones did for the yellow ochres. It has that deep granulation. The Colors of Nature is a bit more even toned. It might be better for people who like less granulation, but overall they're fairly comparable. Then I also have Salmon from Eve here, and the Salmon is pretty much a dead ringer. It's a different pigment, but they're both very similar in hue, with the Colors of Nature being a little bit more darkly valued. I think that's how I wanted to say that. And then if I go ahead and pull out my commercial sheets and we move down to the 101s, it's a bit more brown in color than the Schmincke's Venetian red, but it's more brown than any of the Indian reds or the Terra Rosa from M. Graham. Next up we have Burnt Sienna, which it's a beautiful, beautiful tone of burnt sienna. It's again got that texture that settles down into the granulation, but it glazes very cleanly and is a really nice mass tone. If we compare it to our other burnt siennas, it's definitely redder than any of our Holbein, Sennelier, or Turner samples. When we move down towards American Journey and Da Vinci, we're starting to get much, much closer, although the Colors of Nature is still a teensy bit more red. If we move over to Daniel Smith, this one has gone more pinky brown than this one is. So I think all in all, our closest comparisons are American Journey and Da Vinci. Next up we have our pair of burnt umbers. So we've got a light burnt umber and a dark burnt umber, and you can see here that they are fairly different colors, with the dark burnt umber actually maybe bordering a little bit closer to the raw umbers. I mean, it's still definitely a burnt umber. It's not got that green undertone, but this one off the bat looks a little bit more similar to other commercial burnt sienna burnt umbers than that I've seen before. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Next to Da Vinci's burnt umber, this one is a bit more pink and a little bit more subtle. It doesn't get quite as dark. It's kind of similar to M. Graham's version, further away from Holbein. It's definitely more pink than Daniel Smith's. So out of the ones I have, I'd have to say that M. Graham's is closest, but M. Graham's is still a little bit more on the brownish yellowy side, whereas this one leans a little pink. Moving over to our dark burnt umber, we'd probably have to move towards like right in between Daniel Smith and My Merry Blue. So My Merry Blue's is borderline raw umber-ish looking to me, and Daniel Smith's is a bit more of that middle tone. But if we had something right in between, I think it would be close to this Colors of Nature. I have lost the light outside pretty much all the way, so I hope that my adjusted color balance here is still working okay. My apologies, I think I've been recording for like 4 hours today, but just trying to get all the footage ready for the week. Their raw umbers they have a pair of raw umbers. One is light raw umber, one is dark raw umber, and these are closer than I think the burnt umbers are from each other. Or, yeah, burnt umber. Burnt umber? Yeah. I don't know why that sounded wrong for a second. But the only thing that's really different about them is that the light one is lighter and the dark one is darker. The dark one does have a little bit more texture to it. There's a little bit more of that like little shelving texture in here. And if we compare them to our other burnt umber samples, it is a little bit lighter in tone than the M. version, the light one, but it is the same hue, I think. This one from Mission Gold, their Van Dyke Brown, is a bit more on the warm side. This is much lighter than Core's version of raw umber. And then we start moving into siennas and everything. I don't have a whole lot of raw umber to compare it to, but I think this is closest to M. version. And there is a little bit of that deeper texture in the pockets that we talked about earlier. Are we focused, camera? Come on. There we go. And then if we move over to our dark raw umber, this one matches, let's see, well, I guess it's still closest to the M. version, although this one is darker and a little bit more in the middle. We're closer to Core's version, although Core's version is still a little bit more neutral than the Colors of Nature one. So, if you are tired of looking at browns, I don't blame you. We have two more colors to look at, the Ultramarine and the Chrome Green. So next up is the Ultramarine, and this Ultramarine has a really strong texture to it. You can see here all the way throughout. There's texture just about everywhere. It's the same hue that you would find in any other ultramarine, I think. I don't think there's anything too surprising there. It might be a little tiny bit on the warmer side of things rather than some of these other commercial brands that I have, but I'm trying to look for one that's similar. It's actually very close to Mission Gold's version of the Ultramarine Light. If you remember Mission Gold Deep, it has a different pigment in it. So, but it's very similar to this heavy granulation that we see in the Mission Gold variety. I'm gonna flip it over. We have a few more on the back here. Oh, there's that Mission Gold I was talking about that has the deeper color in it. And I think we're moving a little bit further away. Actually, it looks very similar to Da Vinci's Cobalt Blue Deep. Even though they're from different pigment numbers, the hues match a little bit more closely. So I actually think that that's the closest color match that I have. But in terms of texture, I think either this Rembrandt up here or the Mission Gold at the bottom meet this one pretty well. So I don't have any commercial colors to compare directly to PG-17. This isn't a color that I own very much of at all. Chrome Green is a very opaque color, and it's a nice earthy green, as you can see here. This one, I don't really know what to compare it to because I don't know the typical characteristics, but this one has a fair amount of texture to it. And I have one other handmade version. This one is from Eve, and if we hold those side by side, Eve's is a little bit warmer, and the texture is a little bit flatter, and by that, I'm not meaning it as a bad thing. I think that this one has a nice even finish to it if you prefer not having as granulating tones, whereas if you want a little bit more texture, the Colors of Nature would be a good choice. Then we can also compare these to, I have two samples that were kind of close. They're the M. Graham and Sennelier versions of Sap Green. They're both obviously a lot more yellow since they do have yellow pigments in them, but they were the closest thing I had to this Chrome Green. It's a very, very deep, dark tone, and if that's something you're looking for in your paintings, then you'll be good to go. So I have droned on for quite some time about these paints, and I don't want to keep you here too much longer with a demo painting, but I did want to show you some of these paints kind of in their final stages or final products. And so I did some late night painting a couple weeks ago when I first got these paints to try them out, and I wanted to show you kind of what I came up with. So here's the very first painting that I did. You might have already seen this before. I put it up as a time lapse on my YouTube channel so you could see kind of that process and see a behind the scenes look at how I was preparing for this review. It's got these beautiful textures to them when they dry. There's this, I don't know what to call it. If you have a better word, let me know. It's not necessarily granulation, but it's like the shelving, like it looks like a rock shelf where you've got like the sediment layers in the side of a whatever. I don't know. It has a different quality than granulation, so I don't want to just call it granulation and call it a day, but it's beautiful, beautiful quality. I really enjoyed this, and then I decided to paint another one with some of the more reddish tones. It's a baby Highland cow. He looks a little grumpy here, but he looked grumpy in the reference photo too. And here I can show you up close as well. We've got some beautiful granulation, some beautiful, what I will call for the now, shelving characteristics. We've got some really deep granulation in our shadows. It was really fun to use these colors. And finally, my favorite one, I'm hoping to get prints of this made. I need to still play around with the balance of the colors in my print file, but this one isn't going anywhere. I almost had it up for sale. I took it to a convention and then decided when I got home that that would be crazy because I love this painting so much I'm going to keep it for myself for once. I hardly ever keep any of my own work, but this was the last one that I did that night. I didn't record it because I was like, oh, I'm not very good at bears. I'm just going to go to sleep really soon, but let me try and get out one more. And so I just quickly sketched it and painted it out and didn't record the process, and I really wish I had because I loved the way it turned out. But this again is going back to some of those lighter colors in the highlight areas. We've got some reds in the shadows, and then I used the ultramarine and the dark burnt umber. Yeah, dark burnt umber to get some of those shadow colors. So you can see all the different textures. This one is probably the least textured of the pieces, but I think it works well. For this one, you can see a little bit of it in the shadow areas. I was able to get a really solid black here, you can see. So although there might not be a full range of colors, especially not the bright ones that you might be more used to in modern, non-naturalistic pigments, I still think that this has a beautiful range of colors if you do natural subjects. So that is going to go ahead and do it for our review today. I want to thank Colors of Nature for sending these for me to try out. It has been such a joy to work with your paints. If this is something that is important to you, this meaning vegan, earth-friendly, animal-friendly supplies, I hope that you will go ahead and check them out. And also make sure that if you're not subscribed already, that you go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell icon, because very shortly, I hope next week, it might be 2 weeks, but I'm really hoping for next week, I'm going to be compiling a huge vegan watercolor supply guide for watercolor paints. I've been working on this for months, compiling research, and the reason I contacted Colors of Nature in the first place was for information for this guide that I'm putting together. So be sure to come back for that. We'll talk about tons of different brands of paints, commercially available, handmade paints, all kinds of things, so that you can be well informed about what is in your paints. So thank you guys for watching. Thanks for all your likes, comments, and subscribes. Thank you to my wonderful patrons who keep this channel afloat with their donations over on patreon.com. And I will see you in the next video on Friday. We're going to be doing more of our top 5 favorite series, and I will see you then. Oh hey, are you guys still here? Well, lucky you. As a thank you for watching this video all the way to the end, I'm going to be giving away 6 pans of the Colors of Nature watercolors, plus the entire pot, minus my 1 pan that I have here of titanium white. To go ahead and enter this giveaway, go ahead and leave a comment on this video letting me know which of the colors from this lineup that you like the best, and what you think about Colors of Nature's whole mission statement and making such eco-friendly products. I will announce the winners in my vegan watercolor guide video, which will either be next week or the week after. So thank you guys so much for your support, for watching all the way to the end, and just in general for being so awesome. All right, well, have fun out there, enjoy painting, and I will see you later.